Hello, everyone, and welcome to this session all about zero trust and making it a reality in your organization. My name is Alan Radford. I'm part of the field strategy team in EMEA for One Identity. We are a single security platform vendor for all things governance, privilege access, and directory management. And it's a real pleasure to be representing One Identity here at the Banking Technology Forum in Poland. I want to kick off by asking you a simple question. This person here, do you trust them? Simple question. Would you trust this person? Would you trust me? You've only just met me, but you know my name. I've introduced myself. So you know more about me right now than you know about this person. I would expect the answer to do you trust this person to be no. And I would expect the first question on your lips to be, who are they? Well, maybe they're Dave. Now do you trust them? Their name's Dave. There's a desire for more information before we can start making these decisions. And then more questions come along like, why would I trust them? What do I need to trust them with? What's the driver for this trust? Fundamentals of trusting someone, both in our personal lives and business lives, have parallels. And the biggest parallel that I really want to make clear to you is that they're both concepts, okay? And zero trust is a concept, defaulting to not giving any trust whatsoever unless there's a reason to, okay? You can think of it in terms of least privilege. You know, I'm only going to give somebody just as much as they need in order to do their job, but there's no reason for them to have that permanently, okay? So there's a fluidity there, there's a dynamic there. Okay, so it's a concept, a mantra. There's no zero trust product, okay? It's not something you buy off a shelf. It's something that you practice, okay? And I want to show you how to go about practicing zero trust. NIST have written a great paper about this. I encourage you to go and check it out. There's the link for it, and we'll look at sharing this material with you, of course. Typical NIST papers are hard to read because they're big papers, but this one's a good one. This one's easy to digest. And there are 7 tenets of zero trust that they define in this paper. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to read these to you. They're just here on the screen so that you can read them for yourselves and digest them in your own time. I do want to cherry pick, though, and sort of summarize the key findings here, okay? Basically, you have lots of resources, okay? Computer services, data sources, even your people are resources, okay? You've got lots of things, and they're communicating. Data is moving between them. And when that data moves, access is granted for that data, either in moving the data or in accessing the data, okay? It doesn't matter if it's a person accessing that data, an application accessing that data, okay? It's in motion, and there's a lot of it going on in your environment. And so on a per session basis, on a per access basis, that needs to be considered through dynamic policies, policies that change, policies that are not static. And the enterprise needs to monitor and measure what's going on with all this stuff flowing around and gather as much information as possible, okay? Because the authentication and authorization of these connections going on also needs to be dynamic. So basically, you've got lots of stuff in the form of resources, and you've got lots of communication going on between them, and the nature in which that is allowed to take place needs to be dynamic in nature. It needs to change as and when it needs to change. It shouldn't be static, okay? So there's some fundamentals of zero trust, and I'd encourage you to take a look at the paper. But based on these tenets, consider this. Let's consider our individual, okay? And let's consider it's me, okay? Let's say Alan Radford is on the screen in front of you. I'm also down here. And what I did was I thought to myself, and I'd encourage you to think this to yourselves as well. When I'm accessing resources, how am I doing it? How are you doing it? Me, I do it through the devices available to me. I've got a watch, I've got phone, I've got tablet, I've got laptop, workstation, so on and so forth. And those are my interfaces to my digital world. And my digital world is not just work related, it's also personal. Now, consider for a moment how many accounts you might have as an individual. I've got at least 100 accounts. I stopped counting, in all honesty, and they've all got credentials. Like every time I download an app for dieting or something, sign up. Every time I go to a website to download some piece of software that I need for a lab, sign up. Every time I go looking for slideware, sign up. Every time I buy a new computer game, sign up. Every time I do anything in my digital world, I'm either asked to sign up to something that's new to me or log into something I'm coming back to. And how familiar is that, right? But I don't trust anyone with my digital footprint. Okay. When's the last time you let somebody log into your Amazon account? When's the last time you let somebody log into your Facebook account? When's the last time somebody used your WhatsApp? How many of you have WhatsApp groups for work? Are they corporate WhatsApp groups? Are they personal WhatsApp groups? Is your WhatsApp account in of itself personal or corporate? I don't trust anyone with my digital footprint because I don't have a need to. Okay. But that changes when those digital resources are shared, and that's how it is in an enterprise. Consider, for example, your data center. Maybe you have your own private cloud that you make available to your employees. Maybe you have an external cloud that you make available to your employees. So maybe you've got your own data center being exposed. Maybe you've got an Azure instance that you're using, or maybe you're consuming Salesforce, or so on and so forth. There's lots and lots and lots and lots of resources all over the place that I access. I'll give you another example, LinkedIn. My LinkedIn account's personal, but I use it for work. I've also got access to lots of resources through my work at One Identity, things like email, things like SharePoint, things like collaborative tools, Teams, for example, we use. And so there's lots and lots of areas of resources and communication that carry with them policies about how my trust takes place, okay? Let's drill down into that a bit further. You think about all these different elements floating around, and you think about the fact that some of it's on-premise, and I would challenge the concept of what on-premise means, and I think that's going to evolve over time. Those companies that are moving to a data centerless model, those companies who aspire to be 100% cloud, will always have the on-premise of the individual, because the individual is always going to need some digital window through which they interact with that cloud environment. Okay. So I think there's a valid argument that on-premise is moving from a data center to an individual, but also the rate at which we're consuming cloud in either an infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service, we've all got it. Okay. If you haven't got anything in the cloud right now, you will very, very soon. Okay. And I would bet most of you are actually quite mature in this journey already. But the concept of trust and how that goes through this stack is not so well understood because new challenges come up the faster we consume cloud resources. It's a shift in mindset because everything's moving much faster. Okay. The individual is more agile today than they've ever been before. And when we put that individual at the center, it stands out as obvious that that individual is the center of the security model, identity-centric security, where there's a baseline of access, which comes from a degree of trust. But there's no need to trust them with anything high risk ever until a situation arises where they may need to use that, in which case it needs to be justifiable, it needs to be defensible, okay? It needs to be properly authenticated and authorized, And the policy that wraps around it needs to be dynamic in nature. It needs to be able to change as and when the access itself is required. It's no longer good enough to simply have a privilege just sat there not being used until someone uses it. The privilege should not exist until it is needed. Okay? That's one of the core principles of exercising zero trust. That's the point. And in a multi-cloud environment, that access becomes very distributed, which means that the policies you're using need to be able to hook in to all those cloud platforms. Because in order to be dynamic in a fast-moving world, the policies need to change quickly. Okay? They need to be fluid in nature because your environment is becoming fluid in nature the more you get into the cloud. Think of it in these terms. Exercising our move to the cloud gives us a lot of agility, frees up a lot of operational overhead, gives us a lot of immediate value and allows us to accelerate. And in that multi-cloud environment, it creates security challenges. The more agile we want to be, the more we drive the need for security. I would argue, though, that the more security required, security should drive agility. If security is not driving agility and agility is not driving security, then you're going to result in a conflict of how you're investing. If you're investing wisely, then agility and security will drive each other, and they will both create value from each other. Being able to dynamically manage entitlements in a multi-cloud environment secures your agility and enables you to consume more without increasing the risk. HyperAutomation. A lot of us are invested in RPA. A lot of us are invested in AI. And that in of itself comes with new, unique challenges. Some organizations I've seen have a center of excellence where they wrap an identity platform around their robotic program so that robots are birthed from the identity platform. But other organizations put the robots into HR to facilitate the joiner, mover, leaver process. But what if I said to you, here's a report from your HR system. These 50 users have a date of birth of 2021. Would you care? What if I then gave you another report saying, well, because these robots were put into HR, because they're clearly robots because they were born this year, this report now says that they were provisioned into payroll because they were put into HR. Now do you care? Well, what if I then take it a step further and go, well, their payroll records have been created because they were in HR and because they were in these particular departments, and they now have sort codes and account numbers. Now do you care? Or would it be until you're shown how much money you've paid them that you care? There's lots and lots and lots of unconsidered need when we invest heavily in automation without considering the impact of human resources and non-human resources being fundamentally different things. And it creates new unforeseen challenges, which, funnily enough, security can actually help facilitate and increase the rate of automation. When your robots go off to do something, if the accounts can be created and if the privileges and policies can be changed, the rate at which facilitates that robot so it doesn't slow it down, then your security program has added value to your automation program. And that in of itself helps you to remove barriers by doing things frictionlessly. Look at DevOps. Why would you replace things in your DevOps chain when you can wrap around it without interfering with the tools that are being used, without interfering with the processes that are being refined over time to make them faster and slicker? Wrap the security around the agility that you're nurturing. Don't break it. And then as your business grows, it will scale and it will transform. If your business is not increasing in scale and it's not transforming as it does, then you're not going to be growing as much as you want to, if at all. Being able to monitor and measure all of these moving parts as you scale, as you transform, as you grow. And being able to understand the metrics of the who, the what, the where, the when will allow you to answer key questions of how and why. And that in of itself will allow you to continue to evaluate whether the processes you have in place are sufficient and how they can continue to add value as they themselves scale and transform with your business. That's what we do. So when we think about a zero trust model and we think about the different areas and all the moving parts of that authentication and authorization and how that should be in a just-in-time model where if somebody needs something, we should be aware of that need as and when it's required. Now, that doesn't mean to say that every single time anyone wants to do anything whatsoever, they should request it. All it means is that the policies themselves should be intelligent, should be fluid, should be dynamic. Okay? And they should have visibility as well, especially when it comes to privilege, being able to discover what is and isn't privileged in your environment. Do you know? And as you scale and transform, there's always going to be accounts in your organization. Not all of them need to exist. And the ones that do need to exist don't need to have the privileges they have every second of every day, which means your security footprint can be reduced by adopting that zero trust mentality. And then the question becomes, okay, well, with my processes of accessing those high risk systems, is it sufficient to just vault the credential and have the privileges absent? In terms of how that is authorized, and in terms of how the policy becomes dynamic, when somebody accesses that credential, should they have the credential tool, or should we be using a session? And then for the period of time that session's active, the privileges required should be active, and then not active when the session is disconnected. And then, of course, the next time a session is connected, maybe those privileges need to be different. Okay, either for the same or a different account. The whole platform, the whole concept is around fluidity and being dynamic and meeting business objectives and delivering real business value, especially when you put a governance layer around that and being able to properly get a handle on not just the join, a move, a leave a process, but the requirement of privilege and how the privilege is assigned, how those policies change over time throughout that journey of the person who you would be defaulting to zero trust, but then varying that trust over time as and when appropriate. And then as your platform matures, you'll have a much better understanding of what trust means in your organization. So I hope I gave you some food for thought today. My name's Alan Radford, and thank you very much for this session hosted by One Identity.